I watched Trump's speech to the Navy for their 250-year anniversary, so you don't have to. He spoke for about 50 minutes and didn't mention Biden a single time. However, he did mention the previous administration, and then he mentioned Barack Hussein Obama once. So right off the bat, he was introduced by some immigrant who barely spoke any English and you could barely understand what they were saying. I think their name was Melania. He then walks out to All Hail the Chief, and then after that's complete, he plays the entirety of Proud to Be an American in full. Remember, he's talking to service members this entire time. He says that he has personally ended 8 wars, which again, I've fact-checked this so many times, it's not even worth doing it. And then he says he likes the life that sailors live better than his own life, for some reason. He says that every country needs to learn the lesson to either leave America in peace or get blown up. He also says that Pete Hegseth has led soldiers like no one else. I'm going to remind you that there are 4-star generals, and Pete Hegseth made it to the rank of major. So there are plenty who have led much better than him. He also says that since World War II, we've lost wars because we became woke. He says that as a result of his presidency, we're going to have more ships built than we've ever built in the history of America. I guess more than we built in World War II, which makes sense because he's the president of peace and he's ending all the wars around the world. So why not just spend more money on ships and less on, I don't know, healthcare or feeding Americans or stuff like that? He calls the VA veterans everything, whatever the hell that could possibly mean. He's talking about the White House doctor, and he says that that guy was also the doctor for Obama and Bush, and he says he asked him which one of us 3 was the best physical specimen, and the guy apparently says Trump was the best physical specimen compared to Obama. My God. I mean, even compared to Bush, it's like not even close. He says as he was backstage for this event, he saw so many veterans that his hand will never be the same. So he was either shaking hands or, maybe doing something else. Again, this is in front of military service members. He claims that 2020 was rigged, but that he caught the people who rigged it, and then he just won in 2024 as well. He also says that he single-handedly got the World Cup and the Olympics to come into the US, and then he says that if a Democrat was in charge, he probably wouldn't be invited to those events. Probably not, because if a Democrat was in charge right now, he'd probably be in jail. He's finally given a date for it, guys. The UFC fight on the White House lawn is going to be on June 14th of next year. Okay. He makes some weird claim that there were 2 ships in the Navy when it was founded. There were actually 0 ships in the Navy because if there were any Navy ships, then the Navy would have already previously been founded. If you want to know the history of it, Congress within the first 3 months of the Navy's founding approved for 13 ships to be built and added to the Navy fleet. He makes a claim in front of thousands of sailors that the Navy Academy is in Norfolk. It's in Annapolis. He makes a weird claim that Iwo Jima was one of the deadliest battles in history. Not the history of the United States, but just history in general. So he knows nothing about World War I. He knows nothing about World War II. He knows nothing about any of that, even though he continuously claims we won World War I and we won World War II and we were the Department of War and we won everything in between then. And then since then we have lost wars because we're woke. Again, he says that multiple times in the speech. If you're familiar with combat at all, then you would know what a sortie is. He calls sorties sorties because he's not been briefed on any of this. He's not familiar with military history, and he's just reading off a teleprompter, trying to just sound it out the best he can, like acetaminophen, for example. He starts talking about Afghanistan and Vietnam and says that we would have won every war very easily had we not become politically correct. And then he goes on to say we are no longer politically correct and we don't want to be politically correct anymore. I would never read one of his books, but he makes a claim that just a year before the 9/11 attacks, he wrote in a book that Osama bin Laden was very dangerous and they need to watch out for him. And apparently just no one paid attention to him, even though, again, Osama bin Laden had been on the watch list for the CIA for many, many years before that. He also weirdly in that, accidentally says that he did that with Pete Hegseth, which is a very odd thing. Oh yeah, and then while he's talking about how he knew about Osama bin Laden before anybody else did, he says that if they're not going to give you credit, just take credit for yourself. I mean, it is the story of Donald Trump. On 3 separate occasions, he says that had they not done Operation Midnight Hammer, where the president of peace went and bombed a country that we were not at war with, he says that had they not done that, they would have had a nuclear weapon within a month. He says that on 3 separate occasions. He also says that the Iran nuclear issue should have been dealt with years in advance, forgetting again that he was president. He also will then go on to say that these pilots who did Operation Midnight Hammer have been training for that for 22 years, but that there had never been a president in power who was willing to do the actual mission that they have been training for 22 years, even though 4 of those years he was the president. I know sometimes I don't always give you the full fact check, but just so you know, regarding the Iran nuclear problem being dealt with, when Obama was president, he signed a deal that Iran agreed to no longer produce any weapons grade uranium, and in fact would only use uranium for nuclear programs, and also allowed international oversight to come in and watch that to make sure that they didn't do any of that. And then Trump came in and said, that's no good for a deal, and he just got rid of it, which allowed them to start producing nuclear grade uranium. Again, just so you know the history of that. He defends his extrajudicial killings of people in boats just off the coast of Venezuela because he says that each one of those boats are filled with terrorists and cartels, and that each one of those boats represents 25,000 dead Americans. He then says that it's actually a kindness that they're doing that, and he says that there was another one last night, which I didn't know about, and apparently that wasn't secret information, but he just says it. He also says that there are no more boats in the water anymore. They just don't exist. How does he justify this, you might ask? Because he makes up a number in his head where he says that 300,000 people a year die from drug overdoses. That number is 80 to 100,000, but he's just making up numbers in his head, and he even says, I think that that's the number. No source or anything. He says an airstrike led on the Houthis in the Red Sea was the largest airstrike in history. Just out of nowhere says that. He also then thanks the women from North Carolina who have been following him around to like every campaign event. He says that it's now been 151 campaign events that they've been to, and says that they are rallies that they're going to. And then he calls this event where he, as the commander-in-chief, is addressing sailors in the Navy. He calls that a rally. Crazy. He then says, we don't want crime. We don't want men and women sports. We don't want transgender for everyone. I'm still not able to figure out what that means. He says, we don't want open borders. He says, we don't want millions of people coming in from mental institutions and asylums and prisons, which again, was not happening. He will also claim later that 11,788 murderers were let into the country, but he's gotten most of them out, supposedly. No record of that or anything. He says that Pritzker thinks it's wonderful when 50 people get killed in Chicago. He then also says that DC is now thriving due to the National Guard being there, and that restaurants were closing up and no one wanted to open a new one. But now that the National Guard has gone in just 12 days, he's made DC totally safe and the restaurants are thriving again. Don't worry, military members. We're going to get you all of your pay. And in fact, we're going to get you more because I'm going to just do raises for everyone in the military, because that's how he's saving money for the American people. Is paying more government money to government employees. It's how you save Americans money. Republicans are always for small government and always have been. He says he has a bigger heart than the Democrats when talking about immigrants, and I just cannot stress how funny that is as he is actively going through congestive heart failure. On that note, again, of saving the American taxpayers money, he says that they're going to spend $1 trillion on the military, which makes total sense because he's ended every conflict in the world and is the president of peace. So it makes sense that we would increase the budget for the department that we already spend the most money on instead of spending money on education and healthcare. Why would we do that for the American people when we can spend more money on weapons? He says we're getting wokeness the hell out of the military, and says that it wasn't really the people who were in the lower ranks, it was just generals at the top. And then he calls generals within his own military losers. I swear to God, he calls them losers. He says 100% of ISIS was knocked out within 4 weeks, which I will remind you, ISIS is still not fully destroyed, but he's just saying that. He also says that we have 92% of the frontage on the Gulf of Mexico, so it should have always been the Gulf of America. So again, because I've covered this before, this is what we have, this is what Mexico has, and this is what Cuba has. That's not 92%. He says there's a waiting list for every branch of government. He means every branch of the military, but he messes that up. He also says that there's waiting lists for every police department and every fire department in the entire country. He then will also just randomly say that one day he is going to fall down the stairs. He, on 3 separate occasions, mentions the appearance of 4 different sailors. Twice they were individuals, and once it was a father and son pair. He doesn't talk anything about their accomplishments, just talks about how great they look and how good their genes are. He also says, and you're never going to believe this, that 1 year ago our country was dead, and now we have the hottest country in the entire world, and even the king of Saudi Arabia told him that. All right, 10%ers. I hope the sound was a little bit better, especially the clicks between takes, because I am trying a new microphone. I swear I've tried no less than 7 different microphones, and I can't find one that really works well plugging directly from the microphone into the cell phone. If you know one that works really well, like it's a really high quality, I'm willing to spend up to $300 or $400 for like a really high quality one that won't have the clicks, that won't have any sound issues, that just is plug and play, but I can't seem to find one. So again, I keep working through them. I mean, this is a Sennheiser. This is a nice mic. It really should work. Let's hope that it does. And honestly, thank you for listening. I do hope this is better, but I can't listen back to it until after I'm done recording. So again, thank you guys so much. I do appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate you watching the videos. I appreciate you trusting me. And also, this is like one of the last couple days that you can get a Transgender for Everyone t-shirt or hoodie. They are going off of sale very soon. Link in bio.